Well, hello, everybody. It's God's comic Brad Stein, and this is Brad Stein Has Issues, where comedy, conservatism, and Christianity collide in a cacophony of clarity. What must it like to be you? To be able to watch my show without anybody putting a gun to your head, unless you're watching in North Korea, then you're hidden in a closet. But why do I say that? Because this guest this week is the president, CEO, right, of the National Religious Broadcasters Association, NRB. Troy Miller will be talking about free speech in America and, most importantly, religious free speech. Why is that most important? Is it just because all he cared about is stuff that matters to me? No, because religious freedom is the most important, sacred, sacrosanct freedom you can have when it comes to free speech. Why? Because your religious belief is your most personal, most important, foundational, moral, philosophical belief you can have as a human. It literally is your meaning to life, and what gives life meaning, and of course meaning, as we've discussed before in this podcast with much smarter people than Wyatt. Not me, but Wyatt. I should say this. For those of you watching, please like and follow and hit the notification button on Brad Stein Has Issues YouTube channel, because I need to get 100,000 subscribers. The Lord told me in my prayer closet that once you get 100,000 subscribers, everybody that watches and are big fans will find their lives even more amazing and incredible, because they help my little ministry grow into 100,000. Now, did God actually tell me that? No. Was I really in a prayer closet? No. It's a funny irony to actually get something I could actually use, which is like, subscribe to Brad Stein Has Issues on YouTube. Also, comment on it, follow it. And also another thing I need you to do, go re-listen to it or listen for the first time on iTunes or is it Apple Tunes I'm on?
Apple Music.
Apple Music.
What on earth is an Apple Tunes?
I don't made that one up on the fly. Apple Music. You can listen to me on Brad Stein Has Issues on Life Audio, so go listen to that too. And we're trying to build those algorithms. And by the way, for those of you who are watching and going, hey, these are much shorter than they used to be, it's because we've found that if you shorten the algorithms, then more people will watch for a more length of time, and that allows it to grow and maybe eventually bring in some income so I can afford to keep Wyatt on before he leaves and starts his own business. Me, I'm just going to keep doing this for nothing until God graces me with some income. I don't know if it's ever going to happen.
Well, don't forget, in the future, we will be rolling out the full-length podcast
that's
episodes.
It. That's exactly right. And that's
to anyone who's subscribed to the Ministry of the Mind.
That's exact. Well, he is right, though. For those of you who have subscribed, those of you who've lost their subscription and are resubscribing, it's only $33 a year. I was going to say a month, and that'd be worth it.
Yeah.
$3 a month, guys, so we can keep on air. Trying to go, unless you want to go become part of the Special Forces, where you get a signed shirt and you get a mug and a cup and this and that. But anyways, please, subscribe, because part of what you're going to get is we're going to give you a link so that you can get the full episode. That way you can watch it later on your own time and get much more from the guest than you used to get. I used to just give you a special bonus question. Now you're going to an answer. Now you're going to get a bonus complete, maybe 2 hours, 3 hours, because some I have gone that long, interview with my guests. And this particular guest we have on tonight, it's a special guest because NRB, the National Religious Broadcasting Conference, every year is on, and it's been in Opryland for years, and I've gone there many times. Every time I go, I meet people, I make connections, I meet people that know me that I didn't know, and it's exciting, it's fun. But the biggest thing they want to do is they want to protect the religious liberties of Americans in television, in motion pictures, in radio for Christians, or frankly, any religious belief, because if any religious belief can be censored, so can ours. So we do, as Christians, want to give everybody access to the same freedoms. That's what God would ask of us to do. Even though some of these folks are our enemies, they would treat us as enemies. God doesn't give us the permission because it sucks, but that's what God says. I'm giving you some extra expecting from you as a believer because you are a believer, and I want you to act differently than everybody else to show that this, to be Christ and to do Christness, stands out. It bears fruit. It makes people pay attention and hopefully compels them to want to join the club. And what is the ultimate club? Knowing the living God and telling people about him and spending eternity with him because of what Jesus did, which was die and come back to life to pay the price for our sins. It's a religion unlike any in human history because it is simply true. That without God, there is no meaning. I do want to bring up, for those of you who might be stumbled upon this particular episode with Troy Miller, NRB guy, my son, my sidekick, my producer, and the guy that I really never know what he's going to give me each episode. We just start and hope it happens. Wyatt Stein, my protege. Hello, Wyatt. How are you this particular week as June gets launched?
I'm doing pretty good.
No, you're not. No. Yeah, I felt like there was a hesitancy. I felt like you were pondering it. I felt like you didn't want to make a complete commitment to I feel pretty good, and yet you did. But something's holding you back. There is something at stake. What is it, son? What is it?
Okay.
Yep.
We keep talking about free speech and how important it is.
Right.
But what about paid speech?
Right.
That must be better, right?
Wyatt, don't you understand our entire podcast has been based on free speech and that you and I speak and nobody pays us? It's getting old, my son, because I have to sit here, and write all this material and continue to keep these microphones working, and every time one of these cords go, and by the way, if you're out there and watch the podcast or listen to the podcast, you don't know how many cords we've gone through. They just, for no reason, like, be honest, Wyatt, and in World War II, they used to talk about the pilots, fighter pilots, who would get in their airplanes and fly off and drop bombs on Germany and whatnot. They constantly had to work on the planes, well, at least the mechanics did, and there was always something going haywire. They didn't know why, it didn't make sense, and they called them gremlins. They said that the gremlins got in there and were messing with the fuselage or the bolts or the propellers or whatever else was falling off. Because I don't know if you've ever taken a plane trip with a propeller, but if the propeller comes off, not a good outcome. So would you say when our things go wrong, especially when it comes to cords, don't you think, Wyatt, that the cords have gone wrong more than everything?
Oh, I mean, yeah. I mean, it makes sense. They're fragile, very long, and we use them constantly. They're not going to last.
So it's cord fragility is what's happened then, is what you're saying.
Well,
so they're just big babies. They're just like, oh, it's too hard to have electricity coursing through my veins. I'm going to go haywire, so you have to go buy a new one, and then you can throw me into a dump. Why would they want to be in a landfill? Do you think there's sentience to a cord? Do you believe, in those who believe in sort of a pantheistic view of the world, everything has sentience, everything thinks, we just don't know what it's thinking because it's a mic cord. Do you subscribe to that at all, Wayne?
Absolutely not. I believe, just like World War II planes had gremlins, we have the podcast ghost, remember?
Oh, yes.
That's why our cables keep failing. We are cursed with the podcast ghost.
I'm going to tell you something about ghosts that's always bothered me. And I actually was trying to write a joke about this once, though I saw somebody else, maybe Bill Burr or somebody, one or two other comics I noticed, had a joke in the same vein. Now, before we go any further, I am going to complete my story because Lord knows my stories are compelling. But Wyatt, what is the term, I've taught you this, when you come up with a comedic idea, topic, concept, and you do it and you try to record it and you want to get it out in the atmosphere. Nevertheless, you find another comic doing the same kind of joke or at least the same type of topic. What do they call that?
That is called parallel development.
That's right, because Wyatt, if you can think, and if you find things funny, or if you find things harmonic or melodic, you probably are going to stumble upon similar things. I mean, can you imagine? Do you really think that if somebody writes the song, and you're more a musician than you are a producer or sidekick, do you believe that anybody literally, when they come up with a new song, has really come up with a melody that has never been uttered before in human history?
Listen, if Vanilla Ice can rip off Queen, then anything goes.
Well, talk about a reference from the past. Holy smoke, Wyatt. You're referencing Vanilla Ice and
Yes.
Queen?
Yes, one of those things, a hallmark of American musical and ingeniousness.
Yeah, how does it go?
Queen was there too, though.
Give me the melody.
Dun 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 dun.
Dun, dun,
That's the Queen one.
dun, dun.
And then there's the Vanilla Ice one.
Yeah.
Dun 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 dun. You hear that?
Yeah.
One extra note. Totally not copyright.
Is that what he did? He added
That
one
is
extra
literally
note?
what he did. He added a single note.
Where did it come in with the da 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 da?
Dun da 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 da. Yeah, that.
Dun 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 dun.
Duh.
Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah, yeah. You see it now?
Now, let me ask you this, and this is really important, I think, especially when it comes to free speech, because one of the things about free speech is that everybody has access to the same opportunities to think and believe and create the way they want to. That's why it's so important to the Founding Fathers. They made it possible for all of us to think and create and have the freedom to do that. But there are copyright laws and trademark laws that were put into place so that somebody couldn't steal your intellectual property. Now, they made property out of something that is more of a concept, right? A melody, an idea. But Wyatt, I feel like in some respects that's fair, because it's kind of like otherwise it would have been possible to ever even approach a genre of musical style, or more importantly, I think it'd be more obvious in like filmmaking or theater. It'd be like somebody saying, well, I did a movie, it's a Western, and so consequently no one else can ever make a Western again, because I kind of, created the subject matter, and I'm the one that kind of put it out in the marketplace first, so thus all Westerns are really derivatives of mine. So obviously that wouldn't be fair. It'd be like saying you can't do something about medieval times or something, or about, whatever, the space race. So it has to kind of be public domain. So where does one find the balance between you stole that and it's similar, but it's kind of my vibe? Wyatt, weigh in.
So what you're looking at there is the word escapes me, and that's amazing, because this is when I need to use the word.
Yes.
That's the best time to forget the word.
Well, it's the worst time for it to escape you, that's for sure.
Yeah, I need to catch it again.
Okay.
So the main premise, though, is it's okay for you to basically have the same idea as long as it's a transformation of the idea. You can say react to someone else's YouTube video. It's fine, as long as you're doing something to change the context of the video.
Okay.
Similarly with music and stuff, though I think to a lesser degree, copyright, that's what it is. So copyright means you can't steal someone else's work. Fair use is sort of a caveat, but wait, you can if you're doing it for certain reasons.
What are the certain reasons?
Usually, if you're doing it for education means. Again, if you are transforming the media, you're not just blatantly using the same thing.
So I could steal somebody's stuff and say, I'm educating you on how one can steal somebody else's material and get paid for it and not get sued.
No.
So that's the education I'm trying to give you, is how to con people out of their material.
No, because you're not changing their material at all. It's the same thing. You would have to, actually have a creative input in the thing
Okay.
that fundamentally changes what it is.
Okay. Okay. So, folks, this man is the president and he is the overseer of NRB. And we're talking about free speech and what they do and why you might want to be part of it and why you might even want to come to a convention and come on in and listen and see what's going out there and help. And maybe you want to have your own idea of communicating the gospel through your own unique, special way. You might want to get a booth there and be part of it. That's what this is all about. Israel comes every year. There's a big part for Israel. There's lots of major networks, CBN and TBN, all these. They always have giant booths, as well as publishers and people that make different types of things. So it's really an amazing organization. But as I said, the ultimate idea is to get the gospel out there and to freely be able to protect believers from those who want to eliminate our access to the table of ideas in America. So, without further ado, unless it's too late, I hope you enjoy this episode. I hope you subscribe so you can get on the back end and see the full episode. But for those who are here today for this special abbreviated new versions of Brad Stein Has Issues on YouTube Live and X, enjoy this interview with NRB President Troy Miller. Well, on Brad Stein Has Issues, we like to mix it up, don't like to make it easy on you, never know what to expect. Like a lot of things to come out of left field, curveballs, knuckleballs. I'm going to use baseball references, what the heck. But as a comedian, I am very aware of the ability for the arts to affect culture and to help create a narrative that people use to see the world and how they see the world. It can be used nefariously, and it can be used with great redemption and beautiful stories that can help people. So that's kind of what I try to do. But because I came out of the closet years ago and decided to destroy my own mainstream career by saying I'm a Christian and I'm a conservative and I'm unapologetic, it cost me, a mainstream career, but it also opened up a world for me where I got to do things and say things that I felt were essential for my faith. But it also found me a community of believers who also are like-minded, trying to do these things in real time and try to affect the culture. And it's a challenge when you're Christians. And we're going to talk about that today with the president and CEO of the NRB, which I have visited many times. But I don't think I've ever met this gentleman, and I'm about to, and I'm excited to do so because, I don't know, I think he's a powerful guy, and I never knew it, so I better mind my P's and Q's. Please welcome President and CEO of NRB, National Religious Broadcasters, Troy Miller, one of the many Troys we get to speak to. It. Where is he? Where is he, producer? There he is. How do you do, my friend? Mr. Miller, or can I call you Troy?
You can call me Troy. I'm doing well today, Brad. Thanks for having me on.
Well, it is my pleasure. A mutual friend, Duke White, connected us, and he said, I want you to talk to him because he's an important figure. And you are. NRB, I have visited it numerous times in Nashville. I'm going to be very blunt. I visited Nashville because that's where I live, and it's easy that way. I don't oftentimes make the trip to Florida or to Dallas, though it wouldn't have hurt because I've never gone to the NRB and not made some great connections. I've never gone there and not seen a lot of folks I know, and great to see them again and reconnect. And frankly, meet people that knew me, that I didn't know them. And so it's like, wow, I think that the Christians in the I know it's religious broadcasters, but I mean, to broadcast could mean everything: television,
Right.
radio, podcasts, print media, I'm guessing. Matter of fact, I'm going to let you establish that for those who are watching and listening, especially worldwide, because there probably isn't an NRB in Ecuador that I know of. So can you tell us a little bit about what your mission is, why it's here, and why you think it's crucial, especially in this season, where perhaps Christianity is not always given the respect and the dignity that it deserves.
Yeah, it's not always given even respect, dignity, or just equality that it deserves, amongst other things. So NRB was really formed 81 years ago. So we just last year celebrated 80 years of NRB. It was formed when radio was the new really upcoming medium, and a group of pastors wanted to be on radio. They wanted to be able to preach the gospel. They wanted to be able to disciple church people. They thought radio was going to be a great way to reach the masses. But guess what? Even 80 years ago, gatekeepers came out. The major radio folks out there, organizations, they wanted to limit the amount of time of religious programming. There was a group that wanted to decide who should and who shouldn't be on radio. So that these pastors got together at Moody Church in Chicago, formed the NRV to advocate on behalf of Christian communicators to be in the public square. And that's, Brad, at the core of what we do. We advocate, we work hard to make sure that Christian communicators, and you said today, that includes radio and television broadcasters, that includes all things digital, everything that's going on, digital streaming, digital publishing. About 4 years ago, we absorbed all the publishers, so whether they're digital or print, they're part of NRB. Christian filmmakers are all part of NRB. And of course, the biggest growing group are the podcasters, and then the what we call maybe the social media influencers, the guys doing YouTube channels and TikTok and Instagram and all these other areas. So we fight 365 days of the year to make sure the government, corporate America, or mainstream media doesn't control your ability to speak to the masses, whatever way God has called you to do it.
Well, I'm going to be honest. I'm a little flabbergasted, if that's the right word, because I don't think I ever associated NRB with advocacy for Christian freedom and free speech. I really didn't. And trust me, you are preaching to the choir, because if there's one thing that my life, my career, my skill set, which as a stand-up comic and an actor as well, but mainly in the evangelical community, people know me as a stand-up comic. And so there's nothing more sacrosanct than free speech, because as a comic, my entire livelihood is based on the ability to use any word, any topic, any concept, any philosophy, any presuppositional worldview that I choose to communicate the way I see the world, whether you like it or not. But that is an interesting potential conflict. At least that's how it's sometimes characterized, in that people fear Christians are going to try to, I guess, inculcate our faith into the political realm, and suddenly we become a theocracy, and we're trying to make everybody Christians. And that certainly is not what America was founded on, even though Christianity was the foundation of the Western values that we know. So maybe you could talk a bit to that.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure people lambast you, thinking you're trying to suddenly control the world, and suddenly there's no separation of church and state and all that nonsense. But anyways, let's get your take on that, because you're at the cutting edge of that.
It's always an interesting argument. You're right. That's one of the first things that come out when Christians get involved in, we use this word politics, but we always use the word politics like somehow politics in itself is this neutral, zone where people play in. It's a neutral. When Christians get in politics, it's suddenly not neutral anymore.
Right.
And it's really interesting, Brad, because Christians are the only one that label gets attached to. If the LGBT community gets involved in politics, that's okay. If other religions, if the Muslim community gets involved in politics, that's okay. If the Hindu community gets involved, that's okay. If the secularists get involved, that's okay. But suddenly if Christians get involved in the civic process of this country, and that's what we have to remember, it's the civic process of this country, somehow Christians are the ones destroying the neutrality neutrality of politics. And as we know, that's just a fallacy. That doesn't exist. There is no neutrality in politics. There's no neutrality in civic government. Somebody's worldview is going to prevail and is behind every law that gets passed, every budget that gets set, every dollar that gets spent, every regulation that gets put together. Somebody's worldview is behind that. But Christians yet are the only one demonized, in per se for getting involved in politics. And it's been used as a real tool to shame Christians out of politics. Even the so-called theoretical separation of church and state, which is not at all what Thomas Jefferson meant when he wrote that letter to the Danbury Baptist. What he said was that it's really misquoted. It should say the separation of state and church. He meant the state is going to stay out of the business of the church in so much that we are not going to establish, like England had, we will not establish a Church of England. We will not establish a Church of the United States. The state is going to stay out of the church, but that whole thing's been turned on its head by the liberals. So that's the easy explanation there. People, I think, realize that when you say it, they I don't know why they don't think of it on their own. When you tell them behind everything that gets passed, every legislation, everything that's government is somebody's worldview. Yeah. And as Christians, we know that the most gracious, merciful, righteous worldview that can get passed is a Christian worldview. Christian worldview is behind it. We know through history that some of that has been abused in the history. That's just the nature of who we are as people. But by far, Christianity has the most positive impact on this world than any other philosophy, religion that you could name out there.
Well, and I think you can just see it in real time because if you come to a Western nation, and the West was created by Christians, I mean, it certainly borrowed from Greek philosophy, and it was, what did they call it? The combination of Athens and Jerusalem. But yeah, I mean, but that's because all truth is God's truth. So he can speak through different philosophies and ideas, even if they aren't specifically Christian, and still have a Christian worldview, because that's what people don't understand. Virtually everything that has been hijacked by progressivism, leftism, as some beautiful virtue that they wanted to espouse into. So we don't need God because we have civil rights, we have children's rights, we have women's rights, we have take care of the poor, we have soup kitchens, we care about the poor immigrant that wanders through the desert, and we're going to give them a cup of water. So we don't need your God because we have that. And I'm kind of like, okay, just FYI, those are all Christian ideas and you stole them. So, people, though, Troy, don't understand that even their ethical viewpoint is not innate. It's not some natural thing that bubbles up from their genetic code or their molecules. Somebody had to teach them this is the way that life should be done. And they had to believe that it was morally superior to other ways of doing, because there's different ways and different cultures that have done different things throughout human history. Which ones thrived? Which one brought more freedom? Which one brought more human rights? Which one brought more respect of different ethnicities, even different points of view? That's what makes Christianity unique, in that if you come to the United States, which was a Christian nation, as a Muslim, and you want to make a church, you can. Guess what? I can't even walk into Saudi Arabia with a cross around my neck. It's illegal. And so if you take a Muslim-based culture, they do not reciprocate in the respect for different religious belief systems. Now, that's their business, that's their world, that's their country. But if you can't see that there must be something uniquely distinct about how Christianity views humans and Islam, but not just Islam, communism is probably equally or more wicked in the way it treats people that differ from the state, of course, and that's what they're more concerned about. So, but like I said, Troy, I never saw, and I'm grateful, and maybe it gives me a whole new, fresh approach to the National Religious Broadcasters' purpose. Now, you said it started 80 some years ago. So at that time, Christianity was presumed as the religion of America. It was whether you were Christian or not, at least you respected it. At least you allowed it to happen. If you want to have a nativity scene, be my guest. If you want to pray in school, whatever, because this is who we are. It was more a tradition even at one point. But um, that changed. And that changed with progressivism and secularism really deciding that we are going to uh, be the foundation and the reimagining of what American work. We're going to use all the Christian values, but we don't need Christ to do that. Well, that can't work. That's a divided
Right.
house. So
Right.
when exactly did
Well,
NRB begin to be more focused on, okay, we got a bigger fish here to fry than we ever realized?
really in the late 1960s, in the 70s, NRBs, the government itself kind of started to turn. That's when we saw legislation and policy and those things start to switch, and take their kind of aim at Christianity. So there were some early on cases in the 1970s of whether or not Christian broadcasting, so on radio or television, qualified as what was known as public interest programming. And so could Christian broadcast, so there were some atheist groups, some progressive groups that sued some of the broadcasters and went all the way to the Supreme Court in a couple of times in the 80s and the 90s before the Supreme Court finally came down with a ruling that said, yeah, Christian broadcasting, it qualifies as educational public interest programming. It has a place in America. But of course, there's been, times after time after time where the left has come back after that. But we really saw that shift in government, started in the 70s. It was a little bit kind of sidelined under the Reagan administration, picked back up under the Clinton administration, and then really started to accelerate again under Obama and then Biden. And I think there was no more administration that was more weaponized against Christians than the Biden administration was. So that's kind of the history of the government involvement. But the other things, just Brad, so you know too, we work on some really mundane things as well, like FCC regulations. So there's not more burdens on Christian broadcasters than are on any other broadcaster. So that's kind of the history of it. But back in 1944, this is interesting. As you said, Christianity was pretty widely accepted across the country. The real fight then was between kind of a Christian groups who wanted to decide. It was back to that old kind of thing of, we want to be the state church. And ultimately that was the decision that came down that changed the mindset at the radio organizations that came down and said, no, there is no such thing. We're going to open it up. If this organization, they have the programming, they have the money to pay for the program, then they get on. There's no litmus test going to happen. And that's what NRB fought for early on.
Well, and I think if I recall talking to people like overseas in Europe or whatever, and maybe it's changed. I mean, this might be old, but they didn't really have like Christian radio stations, for example, let's say in the UK or as
Right.
much. And so if they played a song on mainstream radio there, it might be Christian because they just played songs. And so it kind of got mixed in, and if they thought the song had some legs, they would put it out there.
Right.
America's not done that. I think we've been very specific, maybe in some odd way painted ourselves in a corner by deciding that we need our own sacred space where we get to control the narrative. But I think that, and I really want to get your thoughts about this, Troy, because you see the best and the worst of Christian broadcasting, and I don't mean that in that they're sort of heretics or nefarious shenanigans going on, though that happens. But I think if there's one thing that has, and keep in mind, I've been a professional stand-up comic, and especially
Right.
to the Christian community. I just finished my seventh album called "Laugh While It's Legal," so that should give you a bit of a thought of what the direction I'm going. And maybe you're familiar with my life and career. I don't
Hmm.
know, but if so, then
I
you
am.
understand. I've always inculcated Christian worldview as my I've always done something that just simply no other Christian comic did, because I saw the culture eroding. I saw what was happening, and I felt like where comedy can be really important is, and I've said this metaphorically a million times, but it works. Traditionally, the comedians could make fun of the king and not get their head cut off. We were the court jesters. There was this sense within a culture that humorists were given a pass. Somehow we were given sort of a more of a license to what we could say and do, and especially to the elites. We were allowed to kind of bring them down a notch or
Right.
two and try to equate in the UK or overseas, it's called the tall poppy syndrome, like those who think that they're going to raise themselves, we're going to cut you down to size. And comics have been given that privilege for a long time. But I also then ended up in faith-based films. I've done authored things. Now I have this podcast and this and that. And the big knock against that I have heard from producers, directors of our stuff, of our projects and our and the different type of content that we create, frankly, is it's just not sophisticated. It often can come across as corny, a little bit backwards, perhaps a little bit irrelevant. It's not really connected to where are we today, and so um, I don't know if there is a solution to that, because I feel like because we are a subculture, because we have a very specific story to tell, it's kind of only going to reach a group of people that kind of say, we want this. It's kind of like going to listen to an opera channel. They're the greatest singers in the world, but there's only so many opera fans. It just is the way it is. So,
Right.
do you feel like there is a self imposed um, boundary sometimes that Christians create when it comes, especially to the arts, in what we have permission and how we have permission to tell our stories, that have to fit with a very specific framework. And if we get outside of that, we'll lose our audience, we'll lose potential buyers, listeners. In so many cases in Christian radio, their listeners are supporting it. So if they get off track or they bring on somebody that's a little bit more dangerous, suddenly they lose funding. So it's a long, convoluted question, sir. But I know you know what where I'm going with this. Do you feel like, in some respects, we kind of have created our own little ghetto that simply if we truly are trying to reach the masses, we have to be a little bit more, hate to say, progressive in the way we allow our message to be delivered?
Well, I'd say creative in there. But yeah, I mean, there's some truth to all of that there. You know, Christianity, if you look at Christianity over the history of the arts, there's always been an ebb and flow, of Christianity. We've had so much influence on so much of the paintings and the painted arts and all of the things that went on for centuries in that area, and the hymns and the music. And even if you look at early plays and Shakespeare and some of those, they all have sort of Christian messages and themes woven into them. So Christianity, because it was so woven into the culture, always has had that kind of influence. Somehow, again, in the West, in the 20th century, I think we retreated, as Christians. We self-censored a little too much on this whole idea, not of just separation of church and state, but separation of church and the arts and church and culture. And and we kind of, pulled back and pulled inward to there. And so that is some of that's some on us. That's some on us. I really think in the last couple of decades, we've shed a lot of that, and we've seen a lot more Christians getting into the arts. Certainly, Christian contemporary music has a very dominant place. Christian music is often either one, two, or three in most markets across the U.S. The Christian radio stations are up there. Christian Talk and Teach is also some of the top markets. It's the second highest listened to programming on AM radio, for example. So Christians are that. Now, Christian filmmaking, Christian television, that's often been plagued by a couple of things. One, the lack of funds. As the culture turned less Christianity, Christian, Hollywood, kind of really preceded that. And Hollywood wanted to push all the progressive boundaries. So Hollywood really pulled back from its Christian messaging and support. I think we've seen lately, especially in the last 4 or 5 years, that's cost Hollywood a lot. Disney's latest remake of the whole Snow White story, $250 million to make the movie. 50, maybe $60 million in the door. It's going to be a huge loss on them because they wanted to follow this whole progressive worldview messaging. But Christians really, I think today, I think we're seeing a real change in insurgence of the Christian message in the mainstream. Christian movie films have really done well over the last several years that have come out of a number of studios. And even weaving back in the whole idea of redemption, the whole idea of heroes. Look at the Top Gun movie. This is probably one of the biggest movies in the last 5 years or so. The second Top Gun, the sequel to Top Gun. And that whole story is about, kind of the redemption of this pilot, Tom Cruise's character, right? Maverick. Here's a guy that's, he's been a Maverick, so it's cost him career-wise, and he's about to be pushed out and stuff. And then, his integrity, his love for his crew, his people, his men, his idea, his love for his country, his patriotism, all of these themes that come through that movie really have a lot of foundation in our Christian beliefs, our Christian morality, and our Christian ethics in there. And that movie was off the charts. And so I think Hollywood is hopefully going to wake up to that, but we're also waking up to it in the Christian sense ourselves. We have to be better storytellers. We have to worry about the quality of the films and the things that we make. And we have to also really have that, it's a great story, great characters, and great quality. That's what makes for good programming, whether it's television or film. And let me give you one more thing here. I'll tell you the area I am the most excited and hopeful, and that is the young generation, the Gen Zers and the younger millennials, the people that grew up in a time where they didn't know there was, they've never not known an internet, they've never not known a cell phone, they've never not known social media. They're doing some incredibly creative work on some of these platforms, on TikTok and on Instagram and some of these other areas, even some work in Facebook in there, that they're doing some incredibly creative stuff to use the gospel to reach their generation.
Yeah, I do see that. I've heard, I can't keep up with the Gen whatevers. I don't, because there's so many versions, but I did just see in my church, my pastor was showing that maybe it's whatever the latest Gen is, but
The
the
double
big,
A's.
yeah, whatever that is. But the interesting thing was that they are returning to church. They're more
Yep.
conservative than their predecessors. And here's the fascinating thing. And the larger majority of returning are male, not female. For the first time in history, men are out churching the women, which just
Yep.
simply has never happened. One thing I've noticed over the years, and I've said it many times, is that Christians oftentimes in America are trained to judge content instead of context, that they're not sophisticated enough to go,
Mm.
wait a minute, is there a story here to be told, even though there's some words or some language or some ideas or some images that aren't what I would want to participate in. But if it's there to tell the story and it makes sense and it's contextually accurate, I mean, let's face it. If I came to you and said, I got this great faith-based film where these daughters have incest with their father and it's beautiful. You're going, what are you talking about? Well, it's in the Bible. Well, listen, this is a great one where this man is a voyeur and he watches naked women and then he has sex with them, but then he kills their husband. It's beautiful. It's a faith-based film. You're going to go, what do you do it? Well, of course, that's David. So the point of the matter is there's stories that God said, I want this story told. And that story is rough. That story is not pretty. That story is dark. And that's stories that are equally told. And the other thing that Christians do tend to, unless they're mature and truly trying to see God and understand, like you said, by giving them grace, because there's other ways to tell the story than what you're comfortable with, is one of the most well-known clips we've shown a million times in Christian circles is from Chariots of Fire and
Mm.
the idea of why God has called this man to preach and to go to China, but he wanted to run, but now I'm going to run on, and we have been it won the Best Picture Oscar
That's
for
right.
1980, I believe. And
Right.
people go, absolutely, it's a great story. That is Christian. Now we're talking about a Christian story. And if I were to say, you do know that the producer was an atheist, right? And the lead Christian, yeah, was gay. Oh, no, I didn't know that. So does that make a difference? Or is the story still important and beautiful and more crucial than
Mm.
this little nuance that's trying to get you to throw out the baby with the bathwater because something beautiful was being said? Well, listen, brother, as we kind of wrap this thing up, I really want you to help the people watching, viewing, listening to know, how does the NRB apply to them? Maybe they're just average peasants, like they're not necessarily in the arts, they're not necessarily religious broadcasters, but they listen to it or whatever. So show us, how is the NRB active right now in 2025? How can they participate? If so, should they come to the NRB conventions even if they're not in the game? Just kind of wrap it up with a commercial for why and how can we help you guys maintain your advocacy for faith in the free market of ideas.
Well, first of all, as a Christian, we know in the Great Commission we're called to take the gospel to all the world. And look, mass communication is the way we do that today. We do it, around television and radio and the internet. And of course, we live in I say we live in the golden age of communication, because all of us have a cell phone in our pockets today that the most likely accesses the internet somewhere. It's a smartphone, and you can reach anybody around the world. So if you're concerned about the gospel and about discipleship within the church, then yeah, you should be involved. And everybody in today's world is a Christian communicator. The average social media person influences over 400 people in their network. 400 people. That's 4 times larger than the average church in America of about 120. So the average person is a great influencer and communicator. And if you want to know what's going on in areas that may restrict your ability to do that, your ability even to say you're a Christian in public, you can follow us at nrb.org. You can see all the issues we're dealing with in the legislative, in the courts, in the regulatory environment, cultural issues we're dealing with mainstream media. And then, of course, you can find out about the annual NRB convention that we didn't talk a whole lot about. But it is, if you want to be a better communicator, a better storyteller, just even on your social media, if you want to come, we're back in Nashville next year, February 17th through the 20th, and hopefully Brad will be with us. And you want to come
I'll show up. It's in my backyard.
You want to come and meet Brad, you'll find him walking the hallways there. He might be doing podcasts live. Your favorite radio, television, filmmakers will probably be there, and you can run into them in the hall. And probably your favorite pastor that you listen to is going to be there. But it's important for all of us to not be afraid to communicate our faith today, and we live in the culture of communications. And so that's what NRB is all about. And so really, you should be involved with NRB. You should be following what we're doing. And please, please pray for us. That's the biggest thing. Pray for God's favor when we're up on the Capitol Hill and we're working with all those folks in the power place institutes of today, in the corporate boardrooms and the C-suites and all of those things. Pray for us. Pray that we represent Christ well, and we represent you as the Christian community well, also.
Well, you do. I can vouch for it. Like I said, I'm pleasantly surprised the scope of what you guys are doing. That I didn't know. I've had Kelly Shackelford on from First Liberty Institute, who
Great
does
friend.
nothing but defends First Amendment cases for Christians, as well as Jay Sekulows and folks along that lines, as
Yep,
well
another
as the
great friend and member.
persecuted church and Open Doors. So those elements are so important to me as a believer, as a communicator. And
Amen.
so I'm grateful that you guys have really shouldered that as well, and don't just allow those folks to show up, but in fact advocate and want to assist them, because we need each other. Let's face it, the average access to the platforms of the big communicators, they're not believers. They're the antithesis of who we are. They don't want us to even have a voice. So we need each other more than ever. But by the same token, great things are being done. And like you said, maybe there's a change at hand. Maybe something is afoot, that God is creating a third great awakening. Why not believe for that? But we can't do it without telling the story and telling it loud. And
Amen.
boy, why not be
That's
as
right.
prudent and as pragmatic as you can? You could go
That's
talk
right.
to your neighbor, and you should, or you can talk on a radio or a podcast and reach hundreds. Why in the world wouldn't you be the best use of God's talent and the most reach you can possibly do? It just doesn't make any sense
Yep,
any other way to do it.
absolutely.
So that's why we're here, and I can't wait for next year, so I can get over there and see what you guys are up to, folks. This is Troy Miller, President, CEO of NRB. Do what he said. Go find NRB, join them. Maybe you want to give to them, but you get to show up. You can show up and go walk the halls and see what's out there that I'll bet you never even knew. Homeschoolers that want to get information to help their kids. It's all out there. I've been there a million times. It's a lot more than just some radio broadcast. Tons of quality apologetic tools and things along that line are all there for those who care about this nation and this earth. And while we're here, let's leave a legacy that Christ is God. And so, folks, remember, I'm just a comic on Brad Sinai's issues, but I bring on people a lot smarter and a lot more influential than me, and that's how the body works. Like he said, lots of members, one body. Remember, if they ever say you are politically incorrect, always say thank you for the compliment. Nothing greater than speaking truth, especially against the toxic, demonic influence of leftism that's trying to destroy this nation. And again, I'm doing my little part. I'm just a comic and a Christian, but I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, which is what? Putting the woke back to sleep. See you next Monday.